Hi, Mike. Welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you for having me back, John. It was a pleasure last time.
Yeah, it was a really good conversation we had. It was about a year ago. And I think you all at that time gave us a little hint as to how you're moving forward. And now you've actually started a series. And well, of course, we're going to talk about that. I'm looking forward to that. Give us a brief recap as to who you are and why you write books.
Uh, I'm, I guess, what they call an independent author. Uh, I work out of a suburb of Chicago. I've been at this since 1993, and now I have 11 novels on the market, plus three children's books and a collection of juried short stories. The primary reasons why I write, uh, it's a it's a triple. So I write to entertain, I write to inform, and I write to give my readers the opportunity to think deeper, because most of my novels have some core concept or idea or moral issue. Uh, and I want people, when they read the end or three pound signs uh, and put the book down, to just take a moment and think a little bit about how they processed the issues that they read about in the books.
Right. When you started writing and you came up with the idea of doing your writings exactly how you just described it, did you ever think about writing nonfiction where you just, give your opinions on these issues of real life?
So I've done technical guides, user guides,
Hmm.
uh, and the first ones that I did were terribly dry. It was facts about the thing that I was trying to teach somebody about.
Sure.
And my wife told me that it would go off better if I was writing those manuals as if they were fiction, tell a story, engage the reader. And so I've done that since,
Yeah,
and the product is much better.
I agree.
Um, I think that there's uh, some pleasure and satisfaction in the reader figuring out for themselves what they think about, or how their take on what I've embedded in the novel, as
Hmm.
opposed to sharing my opinion, which becomes a, well, you can take it or leave it.
Yeah,
If they come up with their own, I think there's more satisfaction there.
absolutely. That's a path that I eventually took myself. I wrote two nonfiction books, and that was the end. I got tired of hearing my own voice, and so I put my voice into my characters and let them do the talking. And hopefully, when people read it, they can ponder the messages there and make their own decisions. So we are really in line with that. That's why probably we get along so well. Well, let's get right to it. The series is called Creative Deductions. Where do you want to start?
Well, let's talk about the origin and why I moved from nine science fiction novels to detective mystery.
Okay.
Uh, I noticed that in my science fiction stories, my protagonists, male or female, uh, who were never detectives, they weren't little old ladies in small towns helping the police. They had jobs, and they were faced with situations where they had to figure stuff out. There were clues that would lead them to some sort of conclusion. And after I did Forward and Back, which is my most recent science fiction novel, I call it the perfect time travel novel, I decided to test myself. Could I write a mystery novel? My wife, when I asked her, suggested that the best mystery novels that she had read were ones where there were two incidents, perhaps two murders, and the detective figures out how they are related. Uh, and I thought that was a good goal. So the first novel in the creative deduction series, Home Run, is exactly that. There is an accident on a highway where there's an older gentleman kind of wandering around, and they mark that off as an accident. They don't know why he's wandering on the highway, but they don't see any malice there. And within hours, in a gated community near the town, uh, there is a suicide. And so my detective, Nick Chasm, is called back up to his hometown of Eden Gorge, Illinois, by his 82-year-old mother, because the person on the highway who was hit by a car was her 80-year-old male companion. And she believes that there was some ne'er-do-well intention against him. Nick doesn't believe it, but he goes up and then finds out from a local police officer about the suicide within hours. And the fact that the older gentleman was working at that gated community as a landscape architect makes him tie those together intellectually.
I see.
And so that book is him solving those two crimes and tying them together.
Okay. I imagine it has twists in it, right?
Boy, I hope so. uh, I will admit I am not the master of red herrings, but I do try to embed some false clues to potentially lead the reader astray.
Mm-hmm.
But I am known for uh, books that have multiple plots, and sometimes the criticism is that I write too complicated. But I do want to challenge the readers a little bit so that it isn't, oh, they read the first two chapters and they know who did it. Uh, they need to figure it out just like Nick has to figure it out.
Okay. I'm going to ask a question about your writing style because I experimented with multi-plots and it was all in my head. But when I put it to paper, when I was writing it, I used the word meanwhile quite often, and I had to go back and edit it and take it out because you shift gears. You're writing about this scene, and then you know that you're going to shift gears because you're going to the other plot. How did you deal with that?
Uh, so I kind of twist tie them together. None of the plots are standalone uh, with the Velcro word meanwhile tying them together. As Nick uncovers a particular clue or meets someone, there's something about that person's background or their association that starts to tie into something else. And so it's Nick's analysis of what those connections are that are naturally discovered in his investigation that allows the multiple plots to go on simultaneously.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's the book Home Run, and that was your first book in the series, Creative Deductions. How many books are you planning to write in that series?
So that series is three novels. So I'm, in some sense, two-thirds of the way done.
Okay.
Uh, because this month, the second book, Double Play, came out. I decided on baseball themed titles because my detective is a big baseball fan. He has an autographed jersey of a Chicago White Sox player in his condo.
Okay.
Uh, and so I thought that would tie things together. Um, it was interesting when I was writing Home Run. I had no intention of making it a series. It was going to be a one-off. One of the things that happens because I do deep character profiles is as the characters start to talk to me as I'm writing, and they do that. That happens. It's a real thing. Uh, they don't often follow exactly what I might have planned. And so they know the story better than I do. So I listen. I listen real close. And one of the characters in Home Run was telling me or doing things in the story that I didn't understand. Uh, but there was a message there. And so instead of wrapping it up cleanly, uh, I had that character get kidnapped. And so suddenly I had this dangling plot thread at the end of Home Run, which told me absolutely positively that I would have a second novel. And just like the first time I did a trilogy in science fiction, which was Invasive Species, did this about 6 or 7 years ago. When I knew that I had a second book, I immediately knew I had a third book. The scenario laid itself out for me. So that upped the obligation to detective mystery, and suddenly I had books 2 and 3.
Hmm.
I'm pleased now that book 2 is out, and Nick is on the trail of. It starts out to be one kidnapping, turns out to be 2 kidnappings. The kind of echo what went on in Home Run,
Okay.
and he um, follows what he thinks are clues, but they're not really clues. Uh, he's being lured into a trip out of town by the bad guy who finally shows up in book 2.
Hmm. I like that you mentioned about how the characters speak to you. I know what that feels like, and music worked the same way for me. If I'm in a studio, when I used to go to studios and record music, I lay down the original tracks and I listen and I let the song, let the music tell me what I should do next. People thought it was a little woo-woo that way, but it does speak to you. If you're really creative, your product will speak to you. Now, do you start with an outline?
I do. I have refined the process, and every time I write a novel, I refine it a little more.
Hmm.
Uh, the core element in my process is National Novel Writing Month. So early in a year, I will start to consider what I'm going to work on in November. Uh, and when I come up with an idea or a note, I will either dictate it into my dashboard using CarPlay, or I will write it on a sticky note,
Yeah.
uh, and I will gather those up. And somewhere around August, I'll start to pull those together. In September and October, I'll be doing deep character dives on their profiles and taking the stickies, laying them out on the dining room table. Uh, and that creates my outline in a spreadsheet. Uh, and then a lot of October is research, so that I know where things are going to take place, what's there. Uh, you have to make a lot of decisions, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of decisions when you're doing uh, a full novel. Uh, what kind of car does Nick's partner drive? I better figure that out.
Yeah.
Uh, in double play, Nick goes to Las Vegas as he's following clues. Las Vegas is an interesting city to talk about,
Hmm.
uh, but I haven't been in a good number of years, and the place has changed, and the novel timing is 2018, so I had to update my knowledge. So I spent a lot of time uh, looking at Google Earth uh, and Google Streetwise, making phone calls to people. Uh, there is a place called the Neon Museum in Las Vegas.
Hmm.
Never been there.
Right.
Uh, Watched a half a dozen videos. There are old signs from casinos and hotels that are laid out on display, and some of them have been rehabbed with fresh neon. Nick meets the bad guy there, and I didn't know what Nick would see in what order after he walked in. So I called them and I spoke to a very pleasant young man. And I said, do you have a map? And I'll just create the pros from the map. He says, we don't have a map. I went, okay. So here's what I'm doing. And I'm writing this scene. And Nick walks into this area. What would he see first and second? And what would he encounter? He says, I can tell you. And he spent 15, 20 minutes on the phone giving me a verbal tour of what Nick would see as he walked in.
That's great.
There are people who are uh, really happy to participate in a creative endeavor. They get pleasure out of it, and they make my job easier.
Yeah, I agree. That's great advice. And I hope that young authors who are wondering how they're going to write their first book are listening to this, because everything you said is just wonderful, very organized. And yet still, your character surprises you as you're writing the novel and starts telling you to go in different directions. Let me ask you, when you got it all figured out and you're starting to write the novel, does it happen to you sometimes that a new character just pops up, wasn't even part of the outline, and becomes part of your book?
Uh, so I'm not sure that a brand new character does. Often, a character whose role was relatively small, and maybe they didn't even need a name, just their role.
Yeah.
Uh, Suddenly, they are participating more. Uh, and so if I hadn't done a deep dive on their profile, I have to go back and do one.
Yeah.
Uh, the reason is that characters on the page have motivations, goals. How they act is going to depend on what's important to them and their situation, their background.
Mhm.
Uh, Without that profile, you're writing a caricature. And so I want the characters to be uh, truthful in their own skin. So I need to know how they're going to react. It also makes it easier when I'm writing. I don't have to stop and think, okay, how does Nick feel about XYZ? I know how he feels about XYZ. And so as I'm writing, that genuine emotion hopefully can come across on the page. Uh, and I'm not pausing, because during National Novel Writing Month, at least 50,000 words in 30 days,
Yeah.
uh, you got to keep writing.
Do you have a website?
Absolutely. I try to make it simple for people who want to find out more about my novels. The website is www.gerfnit.com. That's a shortcut to my Amazon author page where they can see my catalog.
How are your books being received?
So I am really proud to tell you that last time I mentioned that a home run was coming out. Since then, it was a finalist in the 2023 soon to be famous Illinois contest. So there were three finalists. I didn't get top prize, but just the fact of being selected as one of the three finalists for me was a huge accomplishment. It endorsed the fact that my writing had uh, gotten to a particular level of quality, and librarians who were the judges uh, assessed that Home Run was a quality product. In addition to that, the Amazon ratings have been uniformly very positive, and I think it's at a 5.0. So uh, people are really enjoying that. I'm hoping that I'll see similar results for Double Play.
Super, super. What was it like for you when you first started writing and people didn't know you? And at what point did it become that Michael Pickard's book is something worthy of investigation, and then you can um, be entered into these awards? It doesn't happen overnight. So when did
So,
that take place for you? At what point of your writing career?
uh, I think, well, I was told by a veteran author that I wouldn't find my voice until my fourth novel. And this was well before I had four novels. And that made me cringe that I would have to have four novels before uh, my writing voice would be established. And now I'm at 11, so I kind of shake my head. Uh, it's true that at about that point, my writing matured, and my writing style got established. So people who will read the invasive species and they read Home Run, they'll know that that's the same author. the pacing, the wording, the amount of dialogue versus description, and how those are woven together. Pretty easy to figure out.
Okay,
Uh, I really enjoy the creative process. Uh, Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing it.
for sure.
I am less a fan of the business of writing. Uh, I'm not writing these books to retire on. Uh, I can have a dinner out once in a while for what I make off the sale of the books. Uh, so I'm in the black, but not by a lot.
Yeah.
Uh, so paying attention to marketing and marketing techniques has never been really high on the priority list. Uh, Certainly, I started out using social media, which basically told my friends and family that there was a book out, and they've always been supportive. Uh, a few years ago, one of my colleagues in Fort Collins, Colorado, uh, asked me about my marketing plan, and I said I didn't have one, and she said, "Shame on you." And so she kind of prodded me to create an email distribution list to notify people about uh, work in progress. I don't abuse their email addresses. They probably get one email maybe every 9 months, uh, so that when they get one, they feel like it's important.
Hmm.
Uh, I let them know in those emails, for example, what podcasts I've been on, and I've reached my goal was to be on a dozen, and I've surpassed that goal. Uh, so I'm getting the word out through podcasts, which I really enjoy the dialogue. Doing things like this for me are a pleasure.
Yeah, I enjoy
Uh,
it very much too.
the Because social media didn't generate much in the way of response, uh, I now try to make personal appearances. So when libraries in the area are having independent author book fairs, I'm there with all of my books, and I can talk to people about them and make their reading objectives and my books match up in their minds. Uh, so I don't feel like it's selling. I'm just trying to orient my product to something that they're already looking for.
Yeah.
Uh, and then I have done book signings at coffee shops and restaurants, primarily the coffee shops and restaurants that are mentioned in the books.
Oh, cool.
Uh, a proprietor says, uh, I said that Nick ate 3 meals a week at his restaurant. And his comment was, well, that's my kind of customer. Uh,
Isn't that great?
so I asked to do a signing at his place and met a lot of his customers. And he was delighted. He was all for it.
Yeah. People seem to be impressed when you say you've written a book. They just right away they light up and they want to know all about it. That's been my experience. I guess not everybody writes books, but still, it's an interesting thing.
I get a double take when I tell them that this is the 11th.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and that almost puts them into shock.
Wow. Remind me, are you still working?
No, I retired in 2017, so it'll be 7 years in September.
Yep.
Uh, and so that's allowed me to maintain the pace of a novel just about every 12 months,
Yep.
which is a pretty comfortable uh, time period. Uh, the the rest of my process after I get the NaNoWriMo stuff kind of dumped out of my brain, uh, uh, take the shortest piece of the next step is actually taking that NaNoWriMo stuff and turning it into chapters. Uh, so that takes a few months. But then I use two critique groups, one after the other. So the first group will see it. I'll make editing changes. A second group will see all those chapters. And then it will go through two teams of beta readers. Uh, so you can tell I'm kind of fixated on the quality of the product. I want it to be
Yeah.
as good as it possibly can be. And only after all of that review am I willing to put a cover on it and put it on the market.
Mhm. So you do end up paying money out of your own pocket for these functions. I mean, I'm sure you have an editor as well that you pay for.
So I have thought in the past, and I know editors, a few of them in Colorado, because I'm a member of a writing group out there, even though I live in Illinois. Uh, but if you go to an editor, you get that person's point of view. And it may be an educated point of view, but you get one point of view. In my process, in each writing group, there's typically about 5 people. And in the 2 beta teams, there's at least 4 people in each beta team. So now I'm approaching 20 points of view on the work. And my belief is that 20 opinions, some of which will line up and some of which will conflict, will give me a better range of feedback and more meaningful feedback for the final product. I think it's a better test of the words.
Makes me think of shows that I worked on where there were 5 or 6 executive producers all giving different conflicting notes. It seemed confusing, but in the end, I really appreciated all those points of view. This is a really good lesson right here. That's very good. And I suppose your way of doing it, an editor would charge more money than beta readers. I don't know. I haven't used either one of those services. How does that work?
Well, so I'm really fortunate. Uh, there are people who uh, really, really, really enjoy my writing to the point where if I send them an email and say, I have a novel coming up and uh, it'll be ready for beta reading in December, uh, would you consider beta reading this one after reading another one? And the immediate response is, sure, I'd love to.
Hmm.
Uh, so these people are doing it as support of me and because they get the pleasure of providing me feedback on some words that they enjoy reading.
Cool.
So I have a posse. Uh, I've lost a couple of people on the posse. I've added a couple of people to the posse, but there's a core group that are pretty consistent,
Hmm.
uh, and uh, just like between the first and second critique groups, there's an editing pass. There's some edits between the first beta readers and the second beta readers. Typically, after the second beta readers, it's pretty solid, but they will still find things that everyone else had missed.
Hmm.
Uh, and in Home Run, in the second beta team, one of the beta readers, a fellow named Ernie, uh, told me that there were a lot of plot threads, but none of them came to fruition. He said the reader wants to be able to hang their hat on something that happened that closes out one of those plot threads. So there's a satisfaction.
Hmm.
That one is done. And he was right. No one else had said that.
Hmm.
Uh, so here in the Gold Star. And so that necessitated a change at the end of Home Run. And one of the plot threads, I won't tell you which one, uh, uh, is satisfied. And then the reader says, okay, I earned an ending to one of those plot
Hmm.
threads by reading the book.
Yeah.
And now I can tack the next book when it comes out a year later uh, and pick up where we left off.
Okay. Neat. Now, earlier you mentioned you went into some detail about what month you start doing what and how you prepare, and then the research, and then you're writing your outline, and then you finally start writing the book. It sounds very organized. But when you finish a book, or it's not published yet, and you send it off to beta readers, then that's what you do. Then the schedule could be whatever. It depends on who gets back to you first. How do you negotiate doing all that and still trying to write a second book, or do you wait until you completely done this one and then move on?
No, my goal of getting a book out a year does not give me the leeway to finish one before starting the other. So uh, I have 4 books in process at the moment.
Okay.
Uh, the third novel in the creative deduction series, which is called Strike Three, it has been written. It has been reviewed front to back by my first critique group. The second critique group is reading chapters. Uh, the novel that I dumped out of my brain last November, so I'm going back to science fiction. Uh, uh, and the title, and I want to share the title just because it's a funny title. Uh, Aliens of Mediocre Intelligence. So, so that one is being written from my NaNoWriMo dump. And I'm probably about 20 chapters into carving out chunks of that and turning it into stuff to be reviewed. That one will start its first critique group review in about 2 weeks. Uh, so those are 2 of the books. There's a side project I was working on that's a science fiction novel. It did not go through NaNoWriMo. It was just kind of written kind of on the fly when I had a spare moment. Uh, and that's been going through uh, a different critique group that meets on Thursday evenings. And I'm getting feedback, and it will need a lot of editing if I'm going to turn it into something that I'm willing to publish. And I'm already thinking about the next NaNoWriMo project, uh, which will likely be a standalone Nick Chasm novel. I'm not ready to give him up as a character yet. Uh, there are I've put him in a situation at the end of the last Creative Deductions novel where uh, he's out of gas. He's not running on fumes. I mean, his tank is empty, uh, and I felt bad that I left him there. So I think there needs to be a uh, uh, Nick gets his act together novel,
Hmm.
and so I'm strongly considering doing that this November.
You sound like a very busy man.
Uh, Retirement is an opportunity to be busy.
Yeah, I agree. Hopefully you have time for your family. What do they think about you being an author now? How do they take it?
Uh, so my wife would prefer if I took up some athletics. Uh, she's a big pickleball fan. Uh, I have a bit of a knee issue, so I couldn't pick that up if I wanted to. It would be hazardous to my health. Uh,
Yeah,
but I think she would prefer if I wrote less. But it's such a source of pleasure to me,
yeah.
and it's so integral to my life that she tolerates it.
Well, yeah, they say that sitting is the new smoking or whatever. Doctors say we shouldn't sit in chairs as often as we do and stare into a computer screen, but occupational hazard, I guess.
Yeah.
I know because I've sat in chairs for the last 30 years, doing nothing but, moving my hands a little bit like that. So, um, okay, well, before we wrap up, because I think we've covered these 2 books fairly well, why don't you give us a pitch? Summer's coming up. People are thinking what kind of book they could take with them on their summer vacation. Uh, Sell your books. See what you can say about them.
Okay. Uh, well, the best thing I can do, because I take a lot of time and effort to write the back blurbs. Uh, so let me read you the back blurb for Double Play. Detective Nick Chasm is obsessed with his profession, even outside his Chicago City jurisdiction. Bringing down bad guys ranks second only to his love for his 82-year-old mother. Fresh from solving 2 murders in his hometown of Eden Gorge, Nick returns to Chicago to learn his partner Melanie Cooper has been abducted during a drug ring undercover operation. She had pleaded with him to lead her backup team, but he refused to walk away from his unofficial cases. His commander, Edmund Washington, prohibits his participation in the investigation, because of Nick's emotional connection with the victim. FBI agent Anita McKay, in charge of finding Mel, echoes Washington's orders. Besides, she claims the trail is cold. True to character, Nick isn't willing to sit back and wait, no matter who he has to bulldoze to find his partner.
And they're fairly good-sized books. I mean, it's a serious novel.
Yeah, Home Run came in at about 142,000 words, and Double Play comes out at about 123,000 words. So there's a lot of words.
Yeah, yes, yes. Well, we're wordsmiths. You and I are quite alike. We've had private conversations as well, besides these two conversations that are going out to YouTube. As usual, it's always a pleasure talking to you, Mike. And
Same here.
all right, so I guess we'll just wrap it up here. And until next time, when we talk again, maybe in the fall of 2024, you never know. By that time, I guess your third book will be out.
Well, I'm targeting about a year from now,
Okay,
but maybe sometime between now and then we can have a chat about something else.
sure. And you can be on the show next spring in 2025. I look forward to talking with you more. It's been a pleasure talking with you, Mike. You take care of yourself.
You too.
Bye-bye. Thank you for watching. If you like what I do here on Tell Me About Your Book, then please consider hitting that like button and leaving a comment. You can also subscribe and ring that bell because I release 2 episodes per week, one on Wednesdays and one on Saturdays. And if you are an author, I would love to hear from you. Until such time, keep on writing and be kind to one another.